Welcome to The Truth Unplugged, the podcast where faith meets real life. I'm Nicole.
I'm Father Tim.
And I'm Father Star.
Whether you're Catholic or just curious, this is the place for honest conversations with no fluff.
No fluff at all. Lots of laughs. Grab your coffee and settle in.
And welcome to The Truth Unplugged.
Welcome back to episode 2. I'm Nicole, as you know from the introduction. Today we've got a couple of guests joining us. We've got Father Branson Hipp and Dr. Peter. Father Star, you want to give us a little introduction?
Yeah, so I've known this guy for a very long time. You said 18 years?
I believe it has been
18 years.
Yeah.
First time I met him, I was serving Mass at St. Monica's in Duluth, and I was thinking about becoming a priest. He actually helped teach me how to serve, and we've been friends ever since. He could talk about his own accomplishments. He's actually done a lot. He has 2 beautiful girls.
I have 3 beautiful girls.
3 beautiful girls, right? All in teenage years.
We'll see. We're coming up on 12, 14, and 16 this year. So yes.
Yeah, 12, 14, and 16. He is the clinical director over at Holy Family Counseling. He does a lot for the diocese, a lot for priests. We usually just actually hang out. We'll go and have beer. We'll have wings. Actually, Father Branson, Dr. Peter, and I actually hang out all the time. Is there anything interesting to say about you, though?
Wow, just put me on the spot there. Interesting about me is nothing, actually.
So that is Dr. Peter Attridge. Am I saying it right? Attridge?
It's Attridge. Like you put
Attridge.
a hyphen between the 2 T's. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, welcome.
Yeah.
Glad to have you.
Yeah, so when Father Star told me that he has this group that he hangs out with, and he said, hey, they're going to come here. Are you okay with that? I was like, yeah. And then the little, plotting started happening. I was like, we would love to have Father Branson on the podcast, and if he's already in the building or on the property, let's seize him. And then also, I was just kind of reflecting on a lot of just stuff going around, and knowing that a lot of our young people, or kids especially, that they say it, their parents say it, they have issues with anxiety, with depression, and you see it at just such a higher rate. So when I found out that Dr. Attridge was going to be here as well, I thought this would be a good little opportunity to, did I say Attridge?
Attridge.
This is going to be the whole podcast now.
I figured it would be a great opportunity for our little podcast. So I'm excited and grateful to have both of you guys here.
If you haven't heard Father Branson's voice before, will you say hello?
Hello.
He's here. He's currently serving as the chaplain over at the Georgia Tech Catholic Center. In his own words, he's an avid reader and a loser at racquetball.
This is honestly true.
I know Father Branson, I think it's been 8, 9 years. I can't remember.
What year did you start missions?
2018, 2017.
Okay.
One of those.
Yeah.
And then he used to come out and goof around. And you've probably actually heard us mention him enough times in season 1 where you're like, oh, this is Father Branson. So yeah, as Father Tim mentioned, we are going to be talking today about anxiety, depression, and the spiritual life, and just kind of how those all correlate, I guess. We'll see. So what's new? How's life?
So I don't know. I'm busy, right? So as Father Brad said, I do a lot of things for the diocese and with priests, and that keeps me really busy, and I really enjoy it. It's a lot of good work. But it is a lot of time-consuming work. I have 3 daughters, and they're very busy as well. And fortunately and unfortunately, the mental health world is growing. So I've recently hired 3 new therapists in the past few months. So, getting everybody onboarded and up and going and finding places to put them, because there's a lot of need in the diocese, as well as working on some foundation work so we can get scholarships to help people get into therapy, which is really needed. So those are lots of new things, but it's a lot of good work. So.
And Georgia Tech is not doing too bad at football this season. Are you loving that?
I came out because the Georgia Tech Catholic Center is right by Bobby Dodd. And so we had our tailgate, met a lot of people. But as soon as I was doing a marriage prep as the game was going on, and I could hear the crowd going crazy. So as soon as I finished the marriage prep, I came down to greet people as they came out. I got a lot of drunken hugs, and then they stormed the field when they beat Clemson, and I watched them take
did you
the
see the nerds take it apart?
And some of the drunk bros just being like, "Father, yeah, thanks for the prayers," and I was like, this is not things I pray for. Like, I care about y'all. But yeah, Georgia Tech's going super well. It's really busy as well. We finished 5th week of classes, and yeah, we have a really active community. It's beautiful. The question is always like one of keeping up, and I'd be curious even to hear from Father Tim I think people have been coming out of the woodwork at the level of OCIA and questions about Catholicism. I really think there's something to do with the Jubilee year and the graces of that, but we're seeing a lot of people just pop up with no faith background at all, or very, 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 very devout Protestants that are suddenly like really seeking. Has that been your experience?
Yeah. What I've been telling people is I think that for, decades, we've been kind of lied to, the millennial generation, especially, you can be whatever you want when you grow up. And that people who were raised without any faith, or just very superficial faith, they're realizing the world has sold me a bill of lies and I'm going to look for the truth. And if in good faith, you really look for the truth, you're going to find yourself in a Catholic church. And a lot of people, when they do that, they say, I didn't expect I'd ever be here. This was totally something that wasn't even a possibility for me. I said, no, I'll never be Catholic. And then you see people just flocking in.
Would you say like are people citing something as like what's leading them towards the church in either of your experience?
I mean, a lot of it is, one, I do think kind of the banality of the world, how it's flattened out. Flannery Connery had this image of that, like the modern person, and she said this back in like the 60s, said the modern person is like wingless chickens. They clip the wings of chickens so that they don't fly and then they get fattened up. And so this idea that the modern person has lost the vertical dimension, which they're made for, and now it's just kind of horizontal. And so, but like we're made for the vertical, for the relationship with the divine. So a lot of it is people recognizing they need something and meeting a friend, or honestly, like really seeking, and they find something on the internet and it leads them to to be open to the faith as well. It's pretty all over the map, but I do think that whenever people are in front of a problem or in front of real desire and then they meet someone, that's where things happen.
And I think particularly at a place like the Georgia Tech Catholic Center or here at St. Clair, if that vertical nature is present in the Mass, and the Mass is done reverently, and that's something that people see, especially among young people. I see it really draws them in. It's something that they connect with because it's so other from the world, because it's not just the sort of, you're getting the same thing that you would get anywhere else you go.
Right.
There's something mystical, there's something transcendent about the Mass. And especially when you see incense, when you hear Latin, when those things come in, imagine not having grown up Catholic and then in your 20s encountering a Catholic Mass where there's incense and there's Gregorian chant and there's preaching on the mystery of Christ's passion, death, and resurrection, and encountering that for the first time, what that must be like for someone that has gone their whole life without it.
There's somebody on Instagram right now that's like documenting their story of like how they're finding Christianity. Previously, he was a man presenting as a woman, but he's been talking about how he's like had this huge call, like felt just like the Lord was calling him out of that lifestyle, and now he's like trying to figure out which church he belongs to. So he documents every time he goes to a different church, like what that's like for him. But he found the Catholic Church amidst this series, and just like was like brought to his knees in the church, just like talking about like he could feel the Lord being present there. And now like he's entered into OCIA and he's exploring, and you've got all the Instagram comment people who are like, no, the Protestants, that's not the true church. What are you doing? And then all the Catholics who are like, yeah, man, let's go. But he was talking about like how his his journey into Catholicism has been wrought with a lot of anxiety and attacks on like his character, like how he just like how he views himself and his identity. And so I wanted to talk about anxiety and depression as kind of part of that, because I think like been affecting people a lot more recently, especially like with just like how the news has been going. And I don't know, the world feels kind of dark right now. So Father, or I keep doing that, Peter, as a therapist, would you say that you have seen an uptick in like people who have been coming to you for anxiety and depression related issues?
Yeah. So, I mean, definitely post COVID, we saw a massive increase. I mean, 22% just in my agency of an increase just for anxiety and depression for new time people coming into therapy for the first time. But I would say over the past 2 years, there's definitely been an increase, and the anxiety has kind of morphed from your generalized anxieties about different things to becoming like more anxious about like certain things. So context matters for everybody, but those two things have kind of increased. And I will say, as a therapist, when I look at anxiety and depression, they're two sides of the same coin, so they can feed into each other, right? So oftentimes, anxiety can lead to depressive behaviors or vice versa, just depending on the severity of what someone is experiencing.
Interesting. How do you think that those, or I mean, anyone here can talk about this, but how do you think those feed into the spiritual life?
I think that, and maybe this is a little bit slightly of a different, because even why has it increased is a question. Even when we're talking about the surge of like growth in relationship with the faith, I think that the more we get, I would argue that part of the sin of the modern world is that we are stuck in our heads. Like we are like in love with reality. And even if you think about, I think part of it is our relationship too with the internet. The idea that kids can watch wars happen on their phones is wild in my mind.
Yeah.
The fact that can happen. So you can be in your room totally helpless watching things happen on a different continent and seeing some of the worst things possible, and you're 9. Like that's, I don't think we've fully accounted for how having all of this contextless information, contextless in the sense of its sight and sound, separated from you being there, that like in a room has really affected us on a neurological level. And so I would argue that there's a real problem of that we're not really present where we are. And then we get trapped in our own heads and our own thought narratives and things like that. And it can deeply affect the spiritual life in the sense of how you see God, and you're not even realizing, or you're not even able to really listen to him and be with him. And the number of times someone's like, I can't pray. And it's not even necessarily a problem of prayer, but their brain is just so fried that it's like they can't receive anything. Yeah. And so it's not that God isn't there. It's that, you've fried your brain to the capacity where it's much more difficult to recognize him. And so like that is a real thing. And I think that you need both, and like both the spiritual life can be incredibly healing psychologically, and getting good, like getting healthier psychologically can really open up and blossom the spiritual life. Because, and just to say this super quickly, because I was someone growing up that was pretty cynical about psychology. I mean, I was cynical about most things, probably the most cynical, most like recovering cynical person I know. But I was always like, oh yeah, like psychology is just applied anthropology, and they don't have a sense of the spiritual life. So they're just looking for things that are actually of the spiritual life. And I kind of wrote it off. And it really wasn't until I understood and fell in love with the incarnation and the fact that God became man. And if the method that he uses to save us is by becoming man, then our humanity matters. And this is God's method, is to save us. And so in order to like follow Christ, I need to be more human, not less. And especially in the ascension, like what sits at the right hand of the Father is a redeemed humanity. And I almost was living almost like a dualistic mentality of like throwing out the reality of and there was something fair in my criticism in that there are a lot of people in the mental health world that if they disregard the spiritual reality or don't believe in free will, or it can do a lot of damage. So it's totally that those criticisms were fair, but I was throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And now I see how important it is of good, like healthy psychological, like doing that well, and the importance of therapy and counseling in tandem with the spiritual life, because we are body and soul, and God actually like loves our humanity.
I feel like there's a lot of people that tend to use, at least my experience with like lay people is that they're like, oh, confession is my therapy. Like I just need to go to confession. I don't necessarily need to go to counseling. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, that's not what it's for, and if you think about it, sometimes I tell people when they're using confession instead of something else, one, the problem of holiness is doing the will of the Father. We always tend to schematize in the sense of this is what holiness looks like. You do this, you do this, you do this, right? So it's like, oh, I have a problem, like go to confession. And it's like, no, listen, like sometimes somebody needs surgery, sometimes they need physical therapy. right? You need different things. And we can't just say like, oh, all the problems are solved with confession. That's not what it's for. That's for reconciling me with Christ, his people, and myself, right? And not only that, but to like, whenever you're using something instead of in relationship with it, you're not getting what you really desire, and it's not good. And so, no, like that's not what confession is. It's better, but it's also different than that.
Yeah, and sometimes you do have to catch people and say, there's a long line of people here, and the purpose of confession is to confess your sins and to receive absolution, to be reconciled. And if there's a problem that you want to discuss with me, let's try and do that in a different context, not necessarily in the confessional.
And I'd be curious to hear what Peter has to say about this, because there's a couple times where I've said to my students, and I'm always trying to be delicate. I know the ones I can speak bluntly to, and the ones that have like a more sensitive sensibility. There's been a couple times where I was just like, look, man, you're not an atheist. Like, you need a sandwich and some sleep. Like, honestly, like, no, not a joke. Like, we often don't know ourselves. And I had one student one time who was believing some wild conspiracy theory stuff and all these things. And finally he looked at me and he said, you know what? I think I'm just really lonely. And I was like, yeah, that's the real problem. But if we disguise it as something intellectual, like we're not really being honest. And so sometimes, especially in the church, people can disguise things as an intellectual or a theological or spiritual problem. And it's like, no, man, you need sleep and you need to like work through stuff, and you're stressed and you don't know how to deal with your stress. And so you're either repressing it or you're like giving into stuff that's not good for you. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this from your side of things, Peter.
So just for my own clarification, like what do you mean from my side of things? So, because the way I'm hearing it is exactly what I get with a lot of clients, right? Like a lot of clients. And I think in our archdiocese, we have a priest or presbyterate that is really, really aware of mental health issues. Right. So we get a lot of clients who come in because they're referred by priests in the confessional to say, hey, I was going to confession. Sometimes I was going to confession 3 or 4 times a week. And my priest said, I need to come here and talk to you. So, I mean, I think from my side, what I see is that, sometimes our mental health issues, our anxiety, our depression can lead us into sin a little bit. And so going to confession, there's definitely a part of that experience that is really, really good for the soul. But sometimes it is the work on the mental health side, right, that we have to work on to understand why these things are taking place. So I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
It could just be,
And to your point of, people that maybe try to come to confession 2-3 times a week, there's such a problem of scrupulosity that I think, I don't know if it's fueled by the anxiety or if it's kind of just all together. What I've found myself doing with people that are really scrupulous lately is just kind of slowing down and saying, hey, you need to realize that God loves you, and he doesn't want us to live this way. He doesn't want us to live like in a constant state of fear, looking under rocks, waiting, to go to hell. He wants us to know that he loves us. And I think that, again, that's part of understanding our human nature, understanding the incarnation. And so that's why, for me, a lot of times I'll really urge people, you really ought to consider talking to a counselor or a therapist to try to get through some of this and to actually be able to forgive yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so one thing that you just triggered something for me, you said God loves you. Anybody who has sat in a therapy room with me is going to know what I'm about to say. But, there's 2 things, right? Jesus told us, we have to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. Mm-hmm. And our society nowadays really focuses on the idea of loving our neighbors, which is not a bad thing at all. But we often forget that second part, which is we have to love ourselves as well. And the more we're able to do that, the more we can love other people. But somewhere along the way of social media and technology has all been an outward focus, and very rarely do people actually sit and say, how do I love myself in the way God loves me so that I can be with other people? It's so much deeper than the skincare or the shopping sprees or, going on your vacations that you're going to Instagram everything for, right? Loving yourself is really about like seeing yourself how God sees you. If having anxiety and depression were like bad, right, half the saints that we have would not even be in existence, right? You had St. John of the Cross who wrote Dark Night of the Soul, where the soul is dark and heavy, even when God is present, right? St. Teresa of Lisieux, had all these like doubts about, was God really there, even though, she's a little flower and one of our greatest saints. So, but what they learned, I think, in their process, having read, a lot of their books, is like, God sees me and he knows me, right? He knows the good, he knows the bad, he knows the in between. And if I can see myself in the same way that God sees me, then I can show myself love in a lot of good ways. Skincare is great. Going on vacations are great. Having bro days is great, right? But we have to like figure out like who we are and know who we are, good and bad, because there are two sides of us. And the more we look at that and the more we know who we are and know how we're going to react, the more we can love ourselves in times when it's not going the way we want it to.
Yeah, there's this line I think about all the time. This beautiful text called "What Saves Us from Nothingness." I go back to it a lot personally. And in it, Father Julian Crone says, like, we often think that Jesus is able to overcome things because he is stronger morally, like that he's done like more moral CrossFit than us, or he's just like better. And he says that Christ is faithful in everything, not because he's stronger than us, but because he's more of a son. Meaning he lives everything with an awareness of the Father. He knows he is loved and lives everything out of that love, and he trusts the Father. And so it's a total flip of everything that we would think of. So I even think in the language of like loving ourselves, part of that too is allowing ourselves to be loved by the Father and actually sitting in that and staying in that. And then it gives you the capacity to do what you're called to do. More line of this line of, I think about a lot too with the students of, Monsignor Luigi Giussani said that the problem of the modern world is that we've chosen ethics over ontology, meaning everyone's laughing at me because I quote Giussani all the time.
We're going to start a tally.
That's fine.
Edit that out.
Yeah, edit it
No,
out.
I'm not.
The problem of the modern world, just wait, this is super helpful. The problem of the modern world is we've chosen ethics over ontology, meaning we start with what am I supposed to do instead of who am I? And then you do a bunch of stuff, but it doesn't actually answer who you are, and it's exhausting. And then you're left at the end of it exhausted and you still don't know who you are. But if you know who you are, you know what to do, right? Like actually that emanates out of that. So we've gotten the order wrong. And because of that, people are exhausted and just as existentially lost than ever before.
You know, that brings up an interesting point. Like funeral planning, when you sit down with a family and ask them about the deceased, especially, you know, patriarch, it often is two ways of remembering. It's either he did all these things, this is all the stuff that he did and accomplished, and there's very little talk of love and nurture, or it's he was a beloved husband. He was an adored father. He loved his grandkids, and they focus on love. And when, at least for me, when I'm sitting there and trying not to judge people,
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, wow, it's this version here where there's this relationship that's remembered more than there's the things that were done. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just thinking.
We're allowed to judge, right? Like St. Paul.
Oh, well, sure, yeah. Oh, yeah.
We just can't condemn
Don't
people.
tell him
the
that.
issue.
No.
Don't say
Some
that
people
to
you don't
him.
give permission to that too.
I really, when I look at relationships in my own life, right? The people that I love, the people that I want to spend time with. Yeah, you could look like with a utilitarian mindset as to what can I get out of this, but that's not really a relationship. It's not really friendship. But being able to just spend time with somebody, to sit with somebody, to, you don't even have to have a conversation. You're just in that person's presence. Is such a more powerful relationship, and you're more at ease. I think you're going to be less anxious if you have relationships like that, because you're not worried about achieving something. You're not worried about getting something. You're just simply there experiencing love.
The Bible speaks so much of like, hey, do not worry, do not, be anxious, like trust in the Lord, have all this. And so I think that when people are experiencing anxiety or depression, they feel like maybe they're doing something wrong. Like maybe there's something deficient or wrong in their spiritual life. Do you think that's true? It's not. I know it's not, but could you talk on it?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a popular question, right? Like the people come in and they're suffering through something like, oh, I'm not being a good Catholic, or I'm not trusting God enough in this. As I said a few minutes ago, we have saints that had these same experiences. And I think when we're going through, especially anxiety and depression, this is one of the areas where God will actually love us our most tender, right? You look at Psalm 42 and David, what did he say? He said, "Why are you so cast down, my soul?" Like, that is not the line of a man who had it all together at that point in time, right? But it allows God to come into our lives. So from the psychological viewpoint, I think you can look at anxiety and depression as signals. Like it is our body's way of saying, hey, there's something going on here that is not fitting right. And how do I get it to fit better, right? What is that understanding that I need to have? So, I mean, psychology and depression, anxiety. Psychology can be depressing. But anxiety and depression, there are biological factors, there are trauma factors, there are loss factors, like all these things come into play. But in that, we can also see like where God wants us to make moves and in the direction he wants us to move so that we can understand ourselves better, to not only love ourselves better, so that he can love us better as well.
The only thing, yeah, absolutely, what Peter's saying. And it's always complicated. Reality is always complicated, And so it's like, yeah, sometimes there are practical things that we can work on. And it's just always interesting. I think we want a direct, again, that temptation to schematization of if you do this, you do that. And I think part of the work of having a good therapist, a part of the work of like the church is not for me to create the schema or this is what it looks like, but to actually have people to help me to see what I don't see. I think there's the constant temptation for us of this kind of like self-made man kind of thing, or give me the thing so I can do it on my own. So even I've actually been reading John of the Cross recently. I'm really struck by him. And I think I wrote him off for a while because a lot of the people that quoted John of the Cross, I didn't trust them in the spiritual life. It's like, this is not the dark night of the soul. Like you just started praying. Like, this is not what you think it is. But it's been really, really fascinating reading him. And again, even John of the Cross was really frustrated of the piety of his day, where he's like, people don't know how to go deep, you know? And one of his things talking about night is actually this, he's basically, especially if you think about it in the medieval world, if you go to bed, they don't have lights like we do, right? You cannot make the sun rise faster. And his thing is night is actually the place of education and dependence. And not only that, but it's actually this time of beauty of being carried too, because the Egyptians were defeated at night and the Israelites are hunkered down at Passover. They don't see it, right? So their enemies are like defeated at night. They don't see it. We don't witness the resurrection. It happens that night going into dawn. So for John of the Cross, there is this experience of some of the things in my life I'm actually called to, like even these periods where I'm doing everything that I can, and I'm actually called to just depend upon God and to keep going, knowing that kind of I'm depending, and I can't make the sunrise rise faster, but it is going to happen. Like it is going to arrive. And that's okay. And that's part of leaning on the church is this, because I think a lot of people live the faith on their own. And when their strength collapses, it collapses. They're on their own. Right. But in the church, you have like the paralytic carried by the four guys. So when you belong to the church, there's always this experience of being carried. And so it's not a problem of my strength. And sometimes you're doing everything right and it's still there. And God is actually doing something really, really beautiful. And the acceptance of night, when John of the Cross talks about night, even though he was captured and tortured for a while, he speaks it as the place of meeting the beloved. Even while he honestly asks, like, why have you abandoned me, oh beloved, right? Like it's both things at once for him with a lot of honesty. So it is this place of dependence and it can be very, very agonizing. But having this widened gaze of, like I'm in this and it's not my fault, right? And something is happening and I'm being carried. And I can have the maturity of that position through being accompanied by the church.
At what point does anxiety and depression, like, what is the difference between this and like oppression and suppression? Can you guys talk about that?
Like, you mean a demonic?
Yeah, I do. I've had a couple people recently talking to me about how like they thought they were just having horrible panic attacks, or like they were like having just a really tough time with anxiety, and then they actually met with a priest who was like, "Hey, I think like actually you're experiencing some form of oppression." What is the point?
I think if we look at the world right now, and people say, "Oh, it's a mental health crisis. Everything is mental health." Well, not necessarily. There's definitely spiritual forces, and a lot of people just write that off and think, "Oh, that's kind of a medieval sort of fairy tale to believe, in demons and the devil." And we're smart now as modern man. We can figure everything out in our head, and we can explain things away, and we can fix problems ourselves. And so we maybe because we don't want to face the spiritual realities, we just kind of push it aside. But when you look at all the horrific tragedies that occur in our world, you can't just say, "Oh, it's mental health." It's the devil's definitely behind that.
Right.
But I'd be interested in Dr. Peters' take on that.
I agree with everything you said, right? Like, I think if you truly believe God is real, then you have to believe the devil is real, and that's a big factor in this. So there's a difference between anxiety and depression, and then like oppression and suppression, right? So anxiety and depression are the internal storms. They're the fog that follows you around, or the thundercloud, that you see over cartoon head people. Like, that's the internal thing that you carry around with you. Oppression and suppression are external forces. Sometimes those external forces are, toxic relationships or a bad working environment. But other times those external forces do come from a spiritual nature. But they are separate, but they overlap, right? So you can have someone who's going through a lot of things from an oppressive state that is going to cause depression, right? But you can also, from the anxiety standpoint, right, you can go through grief and loss and you're not processing it correctly, so you're stuffing it down. And anxiety builds up because your soul knows that there is something not right and is trying to let you know, hey, this needs to be worked on. So.
Yeah, and the only thing that evil can do is twist good things. And so part of even like the entryway for evil in these things is a real wound happens and it kind of latches onto the wound and says, this happens, therefore, right? Therefore, this conclusion. And this happens is true, the therefore is not true, right? And so, but even like for those that are trained to be like exorcists for their diocese and things like that, part of the criteria is first like a physical and then psychological, right? And that cleans up a lot of things. So I think err on the side of like, are you doing the things that you're called to do? Because I even more than it being a mental health crisis, I would argue that the problem is an anthropological crisis if we don't know what it means to be human, right? And a lot of our problems, we're just like honestly not living our humanity, right? Like people are like not getting sleep, like cramming all this stuff in their brain. They're not taking time for silence. They're not taking time for real friendship. They're not taking time for prayer and contemplation. All of the things that actually like help us to flourish is our humanity, which God became man, right? And then they're wondering kind of what's going wrong. So I would say start with that. And then if things keep popping up, then consult someone who is knowledgeable in these things. Do you guys agree with that? Do you think that's fair?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, the church teaches our human dignity, right? So there's things that inner landscape, you got to explore that through therapy, medication, whatever it is. And then if those things aren't resolved, then you start to look to the external factors of it as well, right? And so like, I think one way to look at it is depression can be, you wake up in the morning and you can't get out of bed. And oppression would be someone has nailed the door shut, and both things have to be addressed, right? You have to get out of bed to find out that the door is shut, and then you work on that next problem.
Both of you guys have mentioned, well, everyone has mentioned just like the need for friendship and like loneliness being a factor in anxiety and depression. And I feel like you've probably got the stats, Peter, on like what that looks like. Like, I don't want to just make up things.
So 87% of stats are made up on the spot. And no, I don't have stats.
Oh, you don't?
Because I would probably be within like a percentage point of where we need to be, but I'm not really sure. However, I do know that friendships are on the decline, right?
Yeah.
And again, and I feel like I'm harping on it, even though I've only mentioned social media one other time in this, but I do think that the advent of social media has kind of changed what the landscape of friendships looks like, and that we're constantly connected, but we are not connected at all, right?
Yeah.
So in Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, he says like we are the most disconnected, connected generation, right? Generation X is, because they have all of this access to people, but then when it comes down to those personal relationships, they're just non-existent, right? So for guys, like guys bond over doing things, whether it's working on a car or playing football, it's like the act of doing things and not just seeing people do things, right? And I think for the other aspect of it is, we kind of look at friendships like very surface level, right? And I'm going to, in my own friendships in my life, right? So I live in a neighborhood where there's a large friend group, and the women, all the wives, the girlfriends and stuff, they plan all of the get-togethers, and the guys just like tag along, right? And so those friendships don't develop in the same way because there's not like these conversations. We stay very surface level. Kind of, I'm sure, the priest in the room will say this too, but, as a therapist, like people find out I'm a therapist and they're like, "Ooh, you're fine, but I'm not going to like divulge things to you because you're always like trying to, figure out what's wrong with me," which is not untrue. Like you never really turn it off. But but also I can be a friend and, not say anything. Right. So I do think that there's this kind of like cultural suspicion that, male friendship, is either unnecessary or should only stay surface level.
Yeah.
But I think, when we look at Jesus, right, he had 12 best friends, right? He had 12 men. Now, John laid on his breast, right? Peter argued with him. Like, there was depths to these friendships that were really, really important. And even Jesus knew that in his life. Like, he needed friends to make it through everything he was experiencing. So I think that's something that men kind of have to look at and say, how do I, develop these friendships and also take them below the surface of just like, what are the things that we're doing together, instead start being together.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I see it too if people really don't know how to be friends. And I remember being struck at Georgia Tech of I was getting lunch we had a day where we were just running around blessing dorms and apartments and things like that. Like people signed up and I had like a lull. So I went into the student center and had lunch and I was struck by all the people like eating by themselves. It was huge. Like I would say 2/3 of the people were eating by themselves. And I was kind of haunted by this, especially being in the seminary where you have all of your meals together. And I was talking and I was like, I have these guys, like 6 guys in an apartment and they don't eat a single meal together. And I was like, guys, what are we doing? And so one of the things I always propose to my students is like, listen, if you want to live Christianity, one of the things is like at least one night a week, cook together, hang out and talk, maybe pray night prayer together. That's great. But like be together, like spend time together and do good things together. Exactly what Peter was saying of, I find doing things, especially with the guys, like really, really helpful. And as a chance to like open up and talk and stuff like that. But like everybody needs friendship. We're made for communion, and I mean, I watched my parents get younger when they went to one of those 55 plus communities and I made fun of it at first.
Oh, your parents did that too?
Yeah. But I watched them get younger because suddenly they had friends and were spending time with them. And before they just like worked and went home, and so and even thinking about it growing up, one of the things I talk a lot about, like when I'm preaching, I mention my friends because I don't think growing up I ever heard a priest talk about his friends. And for me, like it is crucial, like everybody is called to like share life together and we really need our friends. Cause again, we live this hyper individualistic thing and we literally don't see ourselves. We can't see ourselves. And so like we need people that are with us and things, but also see our own patterns when we don't see ourselves, but also to be able to delight in the goodness of things and to talk about it. We're made to delight in the good, to like delight in the goodness of things. So even my friends of like, yeah, we like the 3 of us, Father Starr, Peter and I, like we're like reading some similar things or shows, talking about it. And I get pumped to talk about the show or a book or something, like we're meant to delight in the goodness of things together. And I think, yeah, it's always easier to just not do anything. I was reading this morning Radical Hospitality. It's an interesting book on Benedictine spirituality. The voice of it kind of drives me crazy. But she's had this throwaway line that I was really struck by where she said, like, we say land of the free, home of the brave. Like, I think we need to start actually being brave in the sense of risking relationship. And I was like, whoa, are we actually brave in the sense of risking making space for relationship, especially when it's more difficult than ever because of how isolated people are and they're not used to it. And there's almost the sense of everybody's waiting for someone else to take the initiative.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a big thing, right? Like so many people are like, well, I don't want to reach out because I'm afraid of rejection.
Yeah.
But I know, with both Father Starr and Father Branson, it's this thing where, if I don't hear from them for a couple of weeks, I'm going to send a text in the text group, right? I'm going to send a stupid meme or one of the jokes that I tell that they really, really love just to kind of get a response back.
He's worse than like baseball averages with the jokes. He's worse than that. He's Michael Jordan baseball years with jokes.
The key to telling jokes is you don't tell them for other people's humor. You tell them just for your own humor, right?
You know about that, Nicole. You're pretty good at that, right?
Thanks, yeah. That's my skill, actually.
Yeah, the fear of rejection, the fear of not being responded to, I think is a big factor in why friendships aren't developing the way they used to, right? Because again, like I said, there's this connection, but being in relationship is being in relationship. You have to reach out to people as well and put yourself out there. And I think a lot of times nowadays people are like, well, that's just too much risk, so I'm not going to do that and kind of stay more isolated and by myself.
There's also, I feel like people are so busy. You know, it's like almost like
for sure.
You're gonna reach out to somebody and be like, yeah, and like, at least in my friend group, my like young adult with family or young adult married with family life, it's like, yeah, let's talk about when we can get together in January 2026 because that's when my calendar is free.
We're for sure too busy as a people, like way too busy. And even paying attention in like at the university, the ones that I get the closest to are the ones that are like in the lobby at the Catholic Center where like you're just like talking about things in between, where it's like free and you're just kind of like hanging out and there's space for that. That's where it really happens. So, and I think having some sort of regularity, this is why I think the families that are doing the best are the ones where it's like, yeah, like we do like Bible study together Monday nights. Like it's regular and consistent. And out of that, there's a space to hang out. But we're definitely overscheduled as a people. And then there isn't this space. And then there's so much pressure when you do go to something that everything needs to be resolved right away. Like find the friends. And these events are just like painfully awkward because there's just all this pressure and like there isn't the space for things to unfold.
You guys help me understand something that I've struggled with since seminary. St. Augustine wrote, I think, De Doctrina Christiana. He said, friendship is a mediant end, right? So it's an end, but it's also something that must bring you to the Father. Does that make sense? And I always tried to struggle with that. And then because how can friendship in itself be an end in itself, if that makes any sense? Because everything we do has to bring us to the Father. Everything we do has to bring us to the Father. But it almost sounds like to be able to reach your fulfillment in the Father, you have to actually have friendships that actually bring you there. That's like a becoming of yourself through friendship.
Yeah, absolutely, because we're made for communion, right? And so even when you really look at the history of the church, it's very rare of a saint isolated by themselves. It usually comes in clusters. Look at Ignatius of Loyola and Francis Xavier, Francis and Clare. It's, like they always come in these clusters. And so, yeah, absolutely. It's by being what it is, it leads to the Father.
By its nature. Yeah.
I mean, I think the first time we see God say something is not good in the Bible is in Genesis when he says it is not good for man to be alone. Like we are created to be in relationship.
Right.
And does that relationship necessarily have to be like Catholic community, like community with other believers? Or because, people, so we're talking about busyness, like people are off at sports teams, their kids' sports. They're like, hanging out in the parking lot when their kids at band practice, whatever. Like, does this wholesome community that we need to feel, like not anxious or to feel not lonely, like does that exist only within the church context, or like what is quality community?
We definitely don't have a monopoly on quality community. And
sure?
Oftentimes, like our community cannot be quality. I'll say for my own life, because I have my non-Catholic friends that I love dearly and are great. But and even growing up, like I went to public school until I went to seminary. So most of my friends weren't Catholic. So this was such a question for me. And even I have a lot of the kids at the university, or like the students at the university, asking about this because they have like their non-Catholic friends and their Catholic friends. And it's like, first, you need a place where you can rest and be, right? And that probably should be those that are gonna like love your destiny and like love the faith, right? Yeah. To where, because, I had people in my past where it was like, if I was not doing well, the things that they would do to de-stress would be not good. And so me resting with them would get me in trouble, right? But I have my friends that love my destiny, and like resting with them is real rest. So I think you need to be rooted in a place where you can rest with the Lord and community, but we're also called to mission, right? And there are things that are just like good, of being in community. But I think we first, like, where is the place where I am being generated, and fidelity to that. And then like I may be called to generate, or it's like, yeah, you also have this community and you're looking at it and it's great. And you're looking at it with a lot of curiosity. But even what Peter was saying of like his friends that are friends, but it can tend towards surface level. Yeah. It's very hard to find people that are willing to like go to the depths with you. Is there anything you guys want to add? Do you agree? Like disagree? Like
I completely agree. I mean, you have inner circles, you have outer circles, and people fall into different friend groups. I think maybe the idea is that everybody has to be a really, really close friend, and that's not true. You can have people who are good friends, you can have people who are close friends, and they get different information and different things from you. I do think it's important that for our close friendships that they understand us completely, right? So what are our spiritual, proclivities and things like that. So there are people who should be in your inner circle who maybe are, more closely aligned with our faith, but, also other things like I'm a big Alabama fan. So if I have somebody who's, Catholic and Alabama fan, that's even better.
Yeah.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
Oh,
Go Gators.
No.
There it is.
oh.
Do you guys have any last thoughts on anxiety, depression, friendship, community?
So I think going back to the busyness thing, whatever your level of busyness is in life, you never get any less busy. The busyness just changes, right? So a lot of times, we have all these plates spinning and sometimes we can let plates fall, but another plate is always going to go up and take its place. So the thing is scheduling and you were talking about how people are overscheduled, but I think people also don't schedule in free time, right?
Yeah.
So like on my calendar at night from 9 to 10:30, it is my time. My kids have gone to bed. Well, they're supposed to be going to bed, but they're leaving me alone. And that 9 to 10:30 time is my time. If I want to watch, a show, if I'm reading a book and I want to sit down, like it is my time just to relax. And if you schedule those moments into your day, it becomes a lot easier to like parse the busyness out. Sometimes we stay busy because like technology has allowed us really good lives, right? You take the history of the world, we are in the top 1% of the world. We don't worry about finding food every day. Most of us. I know there are people that, will argue with me on this, but largely we are very insulated from where people were 2,000 years ago. So we find ways to be busy because I think our natural inclination as humans is to be moving towards things, right? Thinking of the Gospel of Luke where, he says that, or Jesus says, how much greater are you than the birds in the sky? They don't have anxiety. They don't have any worries, right? But the thing about the birds in the sky, they may not worry where the food's coming from, but they go looking for it every day, right? So there's always this movement. So as we do our movement, as we schedule our things, it's important to schedule in the rest time as well, just so we can be those human beings that we're supposed to be.
Yeah, my husband and I have what we call it block night, where we block off one night a week on our calendar. We don't do anything, and it's just like family time, or it's like, we
great.
can't go play pickleball, can't go hang out with friends. Just gotta stay at home, which I hate but love.
and as the kids get older for you, it's like having that one weekend a month as a family where there's nothing scheduled too.
That sounds hard.
Yeah. And having dinner together every single night.
We do that though.
Good. I just took that for granted growing up.
I thought it was
families
everyone did
eating
that.
dinner together. The number of families now that they say, no, we never have dinner together. We're just because we're constantly busy. We're constantly running to the next thing, and that's hard. That's hard for me to grasp.
Yeah. And actually this can get me on a little bit of a soapbox. But so my PhD is in attachment and parenting, and I studied fatherhood specifically. But one thing I know about parenting now, and the dinner thing reminded me of it is, for parents out there, it's 3 hours of video games is fine. And that's great to do with kids, but it's the quality of the time you spend with them versus the quantity, right? So even when we're scheduling things, you can schedule a whole day of activities and going to soccer and karate and flag football and all those other things, but that 15-minute car ride where you're talking to your child, that's the thing that is going to be the most powerful for them in the future. So quality over quantity every single time for parenting.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add too that I think is absolutely essential, because even seeing in my students and in my own life, if I don't have time for silence with the Lord, especially when I'm super busy, I can't tell what actually is the thing that needs to be gotten rid of, right? And this is a lot of people, they're so stretched out and stretched thin, and they're doing it, and there isn't time to actually discern. So especially, there's a reason Francis de Sales said everyone should pray a half an hour a day, and if you're busy, an hour. And he wasn't being snarky. That's not how Francis de Sales was. But he actually meant when we're super busy, we have to have time with the Lord to actually discern, am I doing too much? What is essential? What needs to go? Like figuring out how to navigate that. And I know with families, that's really, really difficult, but having even like 15, 20 minutes of silence to be able to look with the Lord clearly at things can actually like save you from. And I think as well with one last thing, especially in front of anxiety and depression and also scrupulosity, I think the Ignatian examine prayer over the examination of conscience is super helpful in that if people are just doing an examination of conscience, every day it's like, all right, how did I screw up? And every day you screw up and it's just like, man, I'm the worst, right? But the starting point of the examine is, in what way was God taking an initiative towards me? And did I respond to that or not? But every day you're looking at, man, no matter what happened, God took the initiative towards me and he doesn't give up on me. And you shift your attention from yourself, which will cause you to despair, to God who's continually like moving towards you. And so it's like, man, no matter what, he isn't giving up on me, right? So it's a problem of where one put one's attention, right? So I think that is very helpful of like, every day he takes the initiative towards me. He chooses me to be. That's so helpful.
Brother Tim, last thoughts?
I think ultimately just the intentionality of focusing on our humanity, focusing on the fact, based on, you quoted Genesis, and Father Branson, you've talked about the incarnation, just that man's not made to be alone. And so it's so important to seek out those opportunities. And if you do, if you feel like you're trapped, or you feel like, gosh, I just can't make friends, come to church. Like I host the men of the parish one night a month on the third Friday of the month, just to come and hang out at the rectory, just a space for men. And it's an opportunity where guys can come and say, I don't really know anybody at the parish, and I don't know how to go out there and really introduce myself. But then, okay, hey, here we are, and we're just hanging out with Father at the rectory. It's an opportunity to foster that friendship. So we need to look for ways that we can better foster friendship, especially among men.
Father Starr, first and final thoughts, since you haven't talked much.
And just so you know, she's going to cut out everything I'd already said so that this fits, right? No, I've actually been listening. So my past year, I had a lot on my plate, right?
Yeah,
I was a full-time pastor. I was a full-time student. I worked at the tribunal as an advocate. So yeah, the reason I've been silent is because I wanted to listen. It gives me an opportunity to look at how I handled. And the only reason I am where I am, instead of doing like all the things that we're talking about and coping, is because I had like people like Father Branson and Dr. Attridge to actually give me advice and talk to me and let me know what's going on. It actually took taking time of silence to actually make it through it, to realize, you know what? I cannot do everything that I'm doing. And the thing I have to do is step away from the things I love so that I can actually be more united with the Father. So, like, one of the reasons I'm here at St. Clair is because I needed to give up something I love because I was doing too much. So, yeah, everything they said I think was on point. It was kind of interesting to listen to my past year as they're talking and figure things out. And it's important to say that even priests can enter a stage of anxiety where they're incapable of seeing the world or seeing themselves, right?
Yeah.
And so I can say from personal experience, every bit of this advice is important. So, yeah.
This is my personal favorite question right now, Father Branson and Peter. What is a piece of art, literature, homily, or any resource that you'd recommend to someone who is struggling to be convicted of their own sinfulness? And I ask this because I think this world needs more conviction of their own sinfulness. People think they're fine, but more people should be in confession.
I'm cycling through in my head. If you already have something in mind, go for it.
You can give me two. Listen, I personally need them too.
Oh, I mean, Dante. Reading Dante is just the best.
I don't want to read Dante.
I knew that
You
was
don't want to
coming.
read Dante. Well, okay. All right, don't make the journey. That's fine.
Give me something else.
I mean, the Dante, one, it's him saying like he's lost in the dark wood of error. And so he's saying like, is this your experience? To his idea that hell is the place where you get exactly what you want. And if it's not infinite, perfect love, that's actually hell. And so it's not God throwing you in hell. It's whatever you marry yourself to, you get to live out the marriage, right? And he's just so brilliant. He's such a brilliant insight into humanity and like who God is, and suffered immensely. So yeah, I think Dante, don't do it alone. Read it with others or with help. I think Dante's so helpful. The other thing is I've been really following this guy, Bishop Eric Varden. He's fascinating. He's really, really amazing. I think his two best ones, his kind of one that everybody's reading is called The Shattering of Loneliness. Speaking about his life is really, really beautiful. But his one on chastity called Reconciliation of the Senses is really beautiful. But then my favorite one is called Entering the Twofold Mystery, because Bishop Eric Varden was a convert to Catholicism. Then he became a Trappist monk, and then he became the abbot of the Trappist monastery, and then he became the bishop. And his stuff is coming out now because now he's not like the abbot just like holed away in his monastery. Like now, so his conferences that he gave to his monks is so good. And there's a lot of really, really beautiful stuff there. And he has a deep humanity and like love of Christ and the church and also the monastic tradition. It's Entering the Twofold Mystery by Bishop Eric Varden. I can't recommend it enough. It's a beautiful work.
Thanks.
All right. So I think my first one is it's a portrait that was painted, I think in 1600 or 1700s, Caravaggio's The Calling of St. Matthew.
Yeah.
Right. And so in that painting, what you see Matthew like clutching his coin purse, right? And Jesus is on the other side of the room pointing at him and saying, yes, you come, come to me. And I think it's really good because like if you just sit there, in some quiet time with the Lord and look at it, Christ is calling us like in the middle of our sinfulness. He's not waiting until we clean up our mess and make ourselves look more presentable. He's like calling us in our sinfulness, saying, come to me now. And if that's not convicting, I don't know really what is.
Yeah.
Time for the one thing. If you're new to the show, one thing is where we give you a little something to take away and check out for the week, something we personally recommend. We're going to start with Father Tim today.
Well, I'm really grateful for what I'm going to recommend because it just showed up in the office today, and we're actually filming 2 episodes today, so I only thought up one thing. But that little cheese grater thing sitting over there, it just arrived from Italy. It came in a little envelope with Italian writing on it, and I was like, "What in the world is this? Did I order like a shirt or new collars or something?" No, I didn't. But it's this little like bowl with a cheese grater thing on top, so you can take your Pecorino Romano and you can like grate it real fine, make a good, perfect, just a really perfect sauce for pasta alla gricia or carbonara or cacio e pepe, and it grates it fine like snow. And I couldn't find any on Amazon. And then this thing arrived, and I thought that the Zacchaninos sent it to me, and they're like, "We don't know anything about it. Maybe Father Gorov sent it to you." And I was like, "Why would he do that?" So anyway, wherever it came from, I'm extremely grateful for it because it's really hard to grate cheese that fine by hand.
Father Branson, what do you got?
There's a great line from G.K. Chester, and he says, you impotent creatures don't realize how much work can get done through nonsense and good meals. This idea of like being together. And sometimes like when you're really like learn how to be, you can like, so one of my favorite things is some of my priest friends, we put bumper stickers on each other's cars. And it started with like the really cheesy Christian ones of like 3 nails plus 1 cross equals 4 given. The last couple ones I did was I put one on one of the guys' cars where it said, "Please excuse my driving, I am 9 years old." And then I hit him with one that said "horse denier." And had like a cancel sign with a horse and said "not real." The one I've got coming is it's just the 1990s Chuck E. Cheese animatronic head that I'm going to put on there. But a little bit of nonsense. But while doing research, discovered you can get QR codes that say free Wi-Fi, and then it's a Rickroll. It takes you to Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up. So that would be my recommendation. We need a little nonsense.
Peter.
She almost forgot my name again right
No,
there.
let's go to your father again. I can't. There's too many priests today.
So I was hoping when Father Branson said about meals and stuff that he was going to go with the food related thing too, because then we'd all 3 of them have one. But so I cook dinner as Father Tim was saying. Like I cook. My daughters and I eat together all the time, and I've really gotten into cooking dinner, and the girls join me at different stages, and I really love it. So chopping vegetables is difficult. And I was introduced to a Japanese chef knife called a nikiri. Mm-hmm. And if you can find yourself a nikiri knife, they are fabulous for chopping vegetables. They're straight edges. You can cut right through them. They cleave them in half. It has been like a game changer. Hatsu Kokoro is the brand I like, but there's plenty of them out there.
Nice.
All right, since we're going with food, this is going to be a pain in the butt, isn't it? Yeah. Since we're going with food, and since the only thing I'm really good at when it comes to cooking is burning water, I don't cook at all. So,
Do you boil the hell out of it?
yeah, quite literally.
No,
And I
Nicole,
ruined the
don't
pan.
laugh at that. We don't affirm
I
this.
think it's so funny.
That's how you get holy water.
No.
But I actually have to recommend something called Blue Apron, which
Oh
is
no.
Oh yeah.
Do you
I
have
love
a
it.
code?
Oh yeah. So no, I don't have a
Yeah.
code. But it's actually
Didn't realize there was sponsored content.
So and it helps. So I really like real food, and Father Tim is one of the best cooks I've actually met, which is saying something.
Oh, that's nice.
But he is very particular when he eats. So I use Blue Apron to actually get my vegetables and everything else that is necessary for it. And it's really good food. It's natural ingredients. They at least pretend it's organic, I guess. But yeah.
I started reading a book called Raising Happy Kids. It's really good. I don't remember the author's name right off the top of my head, but she talks about how to parent in a happy way instead of making sad, depressed, anxiety-ridden children. So it's recommended to me by Wendy, who's one of your therapists. She's awesome. But yeah, I'll link that in the show notes along with the rest of this crap. So, all right. Well, hey, thanks for jumping in. Glad you could be here.
Yeah,
You make it sound like I barged into there. I was asked, all right?
I very much appreciate y'all letting me co-opt your normal day of fraternity with Father Star to be our guests.
Thanks for coming, though. We appreciate you guys. Anything you want to plug on the podcast? You got any projects coming up?
www.holyfamilycounselingcenter.com. We have a lot of good blogs and we have a lot of good therapists. So if you are looking for help, it's I think we're a great resource.
Nice.
Nope, nothing. I'm not on the internet.
If you got questions, though, that you want answered by us or the guests, send them our way via email at podcast@stclaircc.org, or you can text us a question at the link in our show notes, and we'll probably answer them in an upcoming episode.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram, subscribe, and share The Truth Unplugged with your friends. And if you enjoyed today's episode, I have no idea why you would, but leave us a review on your listening platform. It helps us reach more people.
Until next time, we'll see you. God bless.
God bless.
Bye.